All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to our session, Exploring Sustainability Through an Indigenous Lens, Getting Started with Secondary Students. My name is Marie Tremblay and I'm with the Alberta Council for Environmental Education, otherwise known as ACE. And I am joined by my wonderful co-presenter, Donna Ross, who is well known here in Alberta for her work on education for reconciliation through the Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortia. So glad to be presenting here today with Donna. Donna and I are going to be tag teaming throughout this presentation with the idea of bringing you two different perspectives to this exploration. So myself as a non-Indigenous environmental scientist and educator, trying to wrap my head around Indigenous perspectives on sustainability. And Donna, of course, representing and bringing the authentic Indigenous voice to our conversation. Today, we're going to be using the annotate tool on a few occasions. So I'd like us to practice using it now. You'll find the annotate tool if you go to view options, viewing options at the top of your Zoom screen. And you should be able to access then, if you click on, I think the third option down is annotate. And we're just going to mess up this slide here. So feel free to do that. I'm going to add some stamps here. So bunch of hearts because I'm so happy to have lots of people joining us today. Yeah, there's someone scribbling. Nice work. You can put any kind of stamp in there, or if you use the text tool, you can add a word, and if you click, then the word will show up on the screen. Yeah, there we go. If you're having trouble with understanding the annotate tool, just one more time, it's under on your Zoom screen at the top under viewing options, and I think it's like the third or so option. Usually it says annotate. Now we're getting lots of annotations, so that's a good sign. So that's great. All right, so I'm going to clear that if I can. Let's see now. And clear all drawings. Let's go on to the next one. That was just a practice run. So here's an opportunity for you to let us know who's in the room with us today. So you can use a stamp or write your name, but put a marking somewhere in the appropriate box. And let's just see who's get some kind of representation here of who's with us today. So I'm seeing lots of entries here under the CBE. That's great, but also the Calgary Catholic, nice. And we have someone from a charter school. Yeah, and, almost an even split between junior high and high school. So that's really interesting. And if we do refer to the annotate tool and you're not able to find it, I should point out that if you're working off of a Chromebook, I understand it doesn't work with Chromebook. So if that's the case, just feel free then to participate via the chat, and we'll also be checking the chat room as we go along. You can access the chat from the bottom of your screen.
Somebody drew a lovely picture on the CBE. From the CBE.
Oh my goodness, yeah, down at the cat. I was looking at the check marks up above. All right, so there we go. We've gotten some nice entertainment today. Okay, well that's really nice to see. So I'm going to keep on moving here, and we'll clear that and move on to my next slide. So for those of you who haven't heard of the Alberta Council for Environmental Education, we're a small nonprofit organization whose mission is to advance environmental education in Alberta's K-12 schools. And our vision is to advance, is that Alberta students, are environmentally literate and equipped with the knowledge and skills to help create a sustainable future. And I do want to bring to your attention that this workshop is part of a 2-day environmental symposium titled Hand in Hand, Working Together Toward a Sustainable Calgary. The symposium represents a collaboration between the Alberta Council for Environmental Education, the City of Calgary, and our environmental education community. So we're offering 12 exciting sessions that cover a range of topics, including the Eco School Certification Program, biodiversity, water and waste management, climate change, and of course, Indigenous perspectives, which is what today's this session's all about. Now, to better meet your teaching needs, the sessions are divided into an elementary and a secondary stream. And I just want to point out that this session is specifically designed for secondary teachers. And also, as noted earlier, all of these sessions that are part of the symposium are being recorded, and they will be made available through the ACE website. And I'll show you how to get how to get in touch with us later. Donna and I are going to be sharing a lot of resources today throughout our presentation, and we're going to be happy to share our presentations along with the links to all of these fantastic resources. And I will show you at the end of this session how to get in touch with us to get those resources. So the plan for today then, oh, Donna, you're supposed to speak to this slide, so go ahead.
Well, welcome everyone. Yeah, Marie, you've done a lovely introduction. So the plan for today, of course, is to weave Indigenous perspectives, and then, of course, to deepen your knowledge about environmental sustainability, and then explore best practices and authentic resources. So we have a multitude of resources that are really going to hopefully you'll be able to use, and we've attached a lot of links and some great pictures as well. So thank you and welcome.
All right.
So to further acknowledge that the long history of Indigenous people is inextricably tied to this land, and that a unique relationship exists between Indigenous people and the natural world. This relationship, which is based above all else on harmony with Mother Earth, and has allowed the original inhabitants of these lands to survive and to thrive for thousands of years prior to the arrival of first Europeans. And so with that, we have a beautiful land acknowledgement created by the Calgary Foundation. And so we have a different version. There are a couple of versions, and I know that Marie, I think, linked onto the screen there. So we're just going to press play. It's about 2 minutes in length. So again, welcome.
Land acknowledgement.
Those of us that are continuing our oral history are blessed. What we shared, that was told from way back.
We were part of the ecosystem. We were not masters of it.
You know, after we grow up from our biological mothers, the earth becomes our caregiver. Everything that we need is there.
We were raised to believe that everything has a spirit, and that everything around us is alive and has a purpose.
The spirit of the land and our spirit. You can't separate land and people.
In Treaty 7 territory, I'm accepted, I'm something, and I'm with my people.
We honor our ancestors by acknowledging Treaty 7 territory. We acknowledge the Treaty 7 nations, the Piikani First Nation, the CCTCA First Nation, the Kainai First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, and the Sustainat First Nation. We acknowledge the ancestral territory of the Siksikaitsitapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, and the home of Métis Region number 3.
Great. So let's carry on to the next slide. And this slide is really the foundation for the work that I'm embedded in, and I know that Maria is partnered with. And so the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people.
What is land acknowledgement?
Oh. Are we there? Are we good, Marie? So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is is requires that reconciliation with the natural world be reconciled with the earth. And so upon this work in reconciliation, you'll see that it will never occur unless we're able to reconcile with the earth. And so today we honor and acknowledge the knowledge keepers, the scientists, the artists, the youth, and teachers like yourselves who seek to move us toward reconciliation, not only with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, but also with our Mother Earth. Marie, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, we'd like to acknowledge another reality that teachers are facing this year, which is COVID, of course, and the many challenges and constraints that teachers like yourself have to deal with because of it. You are true heroes in our minds, and we're so happy to be here at the CCTCA convention to support you in the important work that you do. Go ahead, Donna.
Sure. So one of the bonuses of this lovely job that I've been journeying in reconciliation is I get to work with a lot of elders and knowledge keepers. And so having worked closely with Elder Bruce Starlight from Sustainat Nation, who's actually also presenting today as well, when we started, we had joined a few times, and one day in conversation I asked him, Bruce, what does reconciliation mean to you? And so he did share, from his perspective as an elder and a knowledge keeper, he said, we need to shift thinking and attitudes, and we need to recreate our thoughts, and we need to put them back together in a good way. And so I captured that immediately, and I said, do you mind if I use that quote? And he said, absolutely, use it wherever you can. And so with the cultural understanding of the Sustainat ways, the translation is impactful and it's profound, and is far more significant in the language than it is in English. So I would just like to share that. It's a really powerful quote, and I'm glad to be part of this work. So in this part of the presentation, we always do kind of a check-in. What does reconciliation mean to you? And so there's a couple of quotes, and you'll see several throughout, and these are some of the favorite that I've captured. And so of course, reconciliation is not having to say you're sorry a second time, by Cindy Blackstock. And then education is what got us here, and education is what will get us out. So I'm going to just move up here. What that means is it's a personal journey that we all need to embark on. And it's stated to reconcile is to mend one's own heart, the hurt and the pain. And so the process of reconciliation is to make amends, but really it's to come to an agreement or an understanding of the wrongs that were inflicted on thousands of Indigenous people, communities from coast to coast to coast. And to make it right and to make this work happen in a good way, we have to really understand what reconciliation means to us. So the past informs the now, and where are we today in this work, and why are we here? And where are we going? And so really these are reflective questions to help guide us in this journey in reconciliation. And so if you have any comments, feel free to share within the chat box from that particular slide. So it matters not only for those who are with us today, but it also the generations to come and the spirits of those who are not with us here today, whose memories we must honor. And Justice Murray Sinclair was quoted that in 2015 when they began this work in Truth and Reconciliation. And having many family members that had attended residential school, it's really an impactful and a beautiful statement that Murray Sinclair had shared. So I just needed to share that with you because it's really important as we journey in this work that we are all here to reconcile and to make sure this never happens again.
Thank you so much, Donna. So You know, in this session, we're going to practice looking at the world and education through an Indigenous lens. And that is a lens that for most of us here is different from our own. And in order to be able to see things through a different lens, it's important to first understand our own lens. That is our own culture and history and life experience that has shaped our own individual worldview. So let me begin here very briefly with my own story. I was born in Eastern Canada and both my parents are French Canadian. Tremblay is a very well-known name from Quebec. The first Tremblay to arrive in Canada was a fellow by the name of Pierre Tremblay, and he arrived here in Canada in 1692, so about 330 years ago. And like most European settlers of this period, my ancestors were primarily farmers, and they also logged in the wintertime. Now, growing up, I was always drawn to nature and spent a lot of time playing in the woods near my home and on the outskirts of Quebec City. And I think it's fair to say that being in nature was my happy place. I really felt at home there. And I loved reading adventure novels that took place in the northern wilderness and was always fascinated by how Indigenous peoples lived off the land. And after going to teachers college, my husband and I had the good fortune of actually teaching up north for 5 years. And that proved to be an incredible opportunity to experience firsthand the Inuit culture of the Eastern Arctic and the Dene culture in the West. And I was particularly struck by how these people so skillfully navigated and found food and shelter in what seemed to me really inhospitable landscapes. Now, and while I learned a lot from that experience, there is a lot I didn't fully understand at the time. For example, although I had heard of residential schools, this isn't something that was really talked about much. So I never really fully grasped the significance or the full implications of this shameful chapter in Canadian history. Until quite recently, thanks to the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which Donna so nicely explained to us there. Like most people my age, I had learned next to nothing about Indigenous peoples at school, and beyond maybe a few historical references to the fur trade and with the first European explorers. Anyways, when my husband and I returned south, I got busy with work and studies and raising a family, and my journey to better understand Indigenous cultures was largely put on hold. And when I look back at it, I find it really odd that, neither a master's degree in environmental science or a PhD in ecology or 10 years of working in conservation work offered me much, or if any, opportunity to learn about Indigenous cultures or ways of knowing. And nor did all of this time studying terrestrial and aquatic and marine ecosystems across Alberta and Western Canada teach me much about true sustainability. In fact, my work as a conservation scientist taught me a lot about unsustainability. All around me, all my life, I've witnessed unsustainable resource extraction, unsustainable agriculture, unsustainable fishing practices, unsustainable consumption, and unsustainable global warming. And I've come to realize that at the most fundamental level, all of this unsustainability is really largely the result of a broken relationship with the earth, with Mother Earth. And this is what led me once again to take an interest in Indigenous worldviews and teaching, which are centered around the notion of sustainability. And this wisdom and these teachings have guided Indigenous peoples not only to survive, but to thrive in North America for thousands of years. So here we are in 2021, as we strive to envision a sustainable future for our children and grandchildren. I ask myself, well, what can we learn from these teachings? Oh, you're on mute, Donna.
That seems to be a running issue, Miss Marie. Thank you for that. I really am pleased to get to know you further, Marie, as we embark on this work together. And really the work for me has come from many ancestors from the Treaty 6 area. And I am a visitor here onto Treaty 7 territory as well. I am Cree, and I am Métis, and I am First Nation. So I have both lineages from my father, who is Métis, and my mom, who is the First Nations family member. And so within this picture is the black and white picture is her great grandparents, and their names were Sounding Sky and Spotted Calf. And so Sounding Sky, and I'll speak about my dad's lineage as well, but he was really a warrior and very revered and respected in the 1870s. And so when we look at the sustainability of land, I always connected to my own ancestral heritage and how we've had to live off the land very traditionally, and they were very traditional people. And Spotted Calf, I'm sorry, Almighty Voice was his son, their son. And so he was my mom's great uncle. And so in this story, Almighty Voice was doing his best to live off the land. And I know there's a huge history and books and a play and lots of resources to support this story, but he shot a cow by accident, thinking it was their own. And so he was then on the run because he had been arrested, and he did not want to hang for an act when really they were had no choice. They were forced onto a reserve, and they were starving, in reality is what it was. So this story really resonates with me, and I share just a bit of it, but if you can look further into it. But that's my mom's side of the family, and I'm really proud of that. And on my dad's side of the family is that Métis perspective, and my dad's family are from the northern Saskatchewan area as well. And he has a lovely narrative growing up. He grew up with Maria Campbell, who wrote the book Half Breed. She and my father are first cousins, so their mother, my grandma, and Maria's father were brother and sister. So lots of great narrative there around the Métis perspective. And so I've been really fortunate enough to work all over in Saskatchewan, in Alberta, in BC, and I worked on Vancouver Island with several First Nations there as well. So, and with that, I'm popping over to the next slide. So thank you for that, Marie.
Yeah, well, so interesting. And I hope that people, we really are trying to demonstrate something here, which is to just kind of, examine our own stories. And obviously they're so different, right? But that's actually what makes it so interesting. And what a great starting point. So I just want to emphasize here, what a great exercise to do with your students. And I mean, like most classrooms in Alberta, you'll likely find a variety of cultures and worldviews represented. And what a great opportunity to recognize and celebrate diversity and create a culture of inclusion, just like Donna and I are trying to do here as we speak. And I love this one quote from a Stoney Nakoda elder who noted that when it comes to culture, you're never going to be right, but you're never going to be wrong. You're never going to be right if you're not open to other perspectives. And you're never going to be wrong if you act with an open heart. So that's what we're trying to do here. And so we invite you to open your mind and your heart to a different way of looking at things. And let's see where this takes us. Over to you, Donna.
Mm-hmm. So one of the pieces that it's a very profound question that I get asked constantly about cultural appropriation versus appreciation. People are afraid to start, and they're not sure how to start. And so I just wanted to really emphasize that appropriation is harmful, really, because it's an extension of centuries of racism, genocide, and oppression. But cultural appropriation treats all aspects of marginalized cultures. So what we want to do is we want to appreciate our historical perspectives and our treaty education and our intergenerational trauma, but we want to do it in a kind and respectful way. And so you have to seek honor and build relationships with Indigenous community and pair your work with an Indigenous voice. So that to me is what appropriation versus appreciation is.
Thanks, Donna. And I do want to move us along a little bit in the interest of time. So I'm not trying to be rude here, but I wanted to get through all of this. Donna and I have so much to talk about, but we only have an hour together. Anyways, here's a really great exercise that you can do with your students too. I find it really interesting. It's called I'll call it anyways, the placement activity. But it's always, if you're dealing with a new concept, it's always a good practice to take a moment and consider what does that practice, that concept actually mean. And so the placemat here is very, very simple, as you can see, but it's something that, you can do, your students can do individually in small groups or as a class. But the idea is to invite, a definition of a term, what might be its characteristics, providing some examples and some non-examples. And when you go through that exercise, it's a really good way for students in a deep and profound manner to start really understanding what the concept means. So I'm just going to, speed things up a little bit so we get through this. But here I took a stab at filling out this placemat just to give you a bit of an idea what that might look like. Now, I did this from a very non-Indigenous perspective. And now Donna did it, and it looked quite different, actually. Donna, I want you to tell us a little bit about your placemat.
Sure. As Marie led me through this sustainability lens, I thought, wow, this is so unique for me, but it's certainly an area I'm very knowledgeable about. So I was just really gathering my thoughts in this instructional design placemat. So land-based learning to me, or the definition is land-based learning. It embraces the rhythms of the earth, and it's having harmony with nature and an abundance of resources. And so the characteristics are that we utilize the earth as a teacher and a healer, and that we live in harmony and in balance. With that, there are many stories of creation of the earth cycles. And then some examples for that from me were holistic, community learning, hands-on approaches, experiential learning, and then of course, really importantly, are the elder teachings and that oral story. Our non-examples are that I could think of were waste, non-recyclable products, pollution, and then really contaminated water, which is quite an issue with many First Nations across Canada, as we know.
Right. So just a real contrast there, really interesting contrast in trying to wrap our heads around the term sustainability. And here I just wanted to take a few moments to get us thinking about why should we even go there? Why should we care about Indigenous perspectives when we talk about sustainability? Well, Donna and I have come up with 4 reasons, and we'll walk you through them fairly quickly here. But they have to do with history, knowledge, pedagogy, and relationship. And I really want to get to the relationship part, so we'll move through this fairly quickly. Donna, do you want to just quickly speak to this slide?
Sure. So this slide talks about how Indigenous people are an integral part of society and our history, our Canadian history, I might add. So in the spirit of reconciliation, it's important to learn about Indigenous histories and cultures. So with the TQS, which has been legislated, and the TQS-5 is particularly important as we go through truth reconciliation and all the calls to action that they propose that we undertake as Canadians. So here in Alberta, we have made Indigenous literacy a part of the TQS. And so this standard lays the expectations that teachers provide opportunities for all students, not just Indigenous, but for all students to develop a knowledge and understanding of and respect for the histories, the cultures, languages, contributions, perspectives, experiences, and contemporary contexts of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. And so that is a real mouthful, but that really is what the TQS is all about. So.
Thank you, Donna. And I'm, as a scientist, I've really been interested in this question of knowledge. And in my explorations, I've really come to realize that, Indigenous knowledge is the only knowledge that was born out of a direct relationship with our land. And this knowledge was developed over thousands of years. So in this way, Indigenous knowledge is truly unique to our place right here in Alberta, in Canada. And by contrast, our school system is based almost entirely on Eurocentric knowledge, which is not Indigenous to North America, but arrived here with the first Europeans only a few centuries ago. And to just kind of illustrate this point here, you might, especially the science teachers in our group, would be very familiar with this scenario, I think. The foundations of Eurocentric knowledge can be traced back to the ancient Greek philosophers like Aristotle, who lived around 2,400 years ago. He laid down the foundations of philosophy, logics, ethics, and empirical biology, all of which are still deemed relevant today and form really the foundation of our current school system. And then, working through the centuries, we had Nicholas Copernicus as an example, who showed up around the year 1500 during the Renaissance. And he introduced us to the revolutionary idea that the Earth actually revolved around the sun and not the other way around. Then we had the likes of Isaac Newton, who introduced us to, the world of classical physics, and then Einstein in the mid 1990s, who kind of basically threw Newtonian, physics out the window and introduced us to this idea of relativity and his famous equation E equals mc squared. Now, I just want to put all of this into context, in the context of Indigenous history in North America. And this, by the way, would be a great activity that you could do with your students. I'm envisioning here taking, a string or a ruler or something and stringing it along. You could mark it in segments for every 1,000 years. We're not talking centuries here, we're talking millennia. And let's just see what happens with this. I noticed a few comments in the slides, in the chat around whether you can get access to these slides. Absolutely. These presentations and all the resources will be available to you, and we'll show you how to do that at the end of the workshop. So let's just go through this a bit. So, around 11,000 years ago, this is when it's believed, the Indigenous peoples first arrived in North America at the end of the Ice Age. And now we have, our ancient Greek philosopher, Aristotle, not show up in North America, but, the first teachings of the ancient Greeks 2,400 years ago. And here's Christopher Columbus, who arrived more or less 500 years ago. I can't actually see the whole slide right there, but I think we have MacDonald here. This is what we consider a forefather of Canada, our first prime minister, only 150 years ago or so. And I think I have in there my ancestor Pierre Tremblay arrived around 300 years ago. And just to add a little bit more perspective, there's Stonehenge about 5,000 years ago. Now, not in North America, but just for comparison's sake. And the Great Pyramids were built around 45,000 years ago. So I just invite you to look at this timeline and think about how long the Indigenous knowledge has evolved with our land over these millennia. And then really enter, us Europeans, European settlers, around 500 years ago. And when you start to put that into perspective, you see that we've not paid much attention to this vast body of knowledge. And that's what we're here to talk about. Over to you, Donna.
Sure. Thank you. I love that timeline. It really does demonstrate a lot. So my timeline, I try to include as many Indigenous role models, knowledge keepers, ceremony keepers, and really just traditional elders as well. And so do you recognize any of these faces? And so if you can use the annotate tool to put a stamp next to the ones you do recognize, please do that right now. And we're just trying to get a feel for your own foundational knowledge within an Indigenous lens here. So.
And a reminder that you can access the annotate tool from view options at the top of your Zoom screen. And annotate usually around the third option. There's a little menu that drops down. Donna, we're not seeing a lot of check marks or markings here. And yeah, not everybody has the annotate tool. So I see the comment there, especially if you're working off of a Chromebook, not to worry. Let's just move on to the next slide there, Donna.
I see. No, there was a few people that
there were?
starting.
Oh, yeah, sorry, they're just starting to get there. Okay, excellent. Yeah, I'm seeing a few.
Yeah, the annotated tool is really tiny in perspective to the pictures. So yeah, perfect. I see there are a few that recognize some of our elders and knowledge keepers. Justice Marie Sinclair is very widely known. And one of my favorite people is, but all my knowledge keeper friends and elders are my favorite people. Yvonne Poitras-Pratt, Bruce Starlight, Tina Fox, Maria Campbell, and some of our role models and youth that have been in the media, social media platform lately, Autumn Peltier. and Jade Tutusis. So, and of course, my lovely friend, Charlene Barrhead, who really advocates for Indigenous education and rights. And there are some local people there within the slides as well.
So many great, wonderful people to look up. Actually, I've just been, every time I learn about one thing, it leads me to another, and I just realize that, there's just so many wonderful knowledge keepers and elders out there with such great things to share. So thank you, Donna, for that. I'm going to try and get rid of the annotate at this point. Clear it. Okay. Yeah, we are a little bit pressed for time, so I'm going to skip over this slide. And but really, I just want to make a quick point here is about the fact that Indigenous knowledge and Western knowledge, it's not. We tend to think that knowledge is like reality, but really we only really know and understand a small part of our entire universe, and what we know and understand is very informed by our worldview and our culture, and that's what I was trying to portray in that slide there. And just this idea of opening ourselves up to that possibility and realizing that our school system really is steeped on this side of this diagram. And yet there's a lot of knowledge to learn from on this side as well. So I'm just going to keep moving here. Here we just put together a bit of a comparison of what the knowledge, from an Indigenous perspective and Eurocentric looks like. This will be in your presentation, so I'm going to keep moving because we wanted to touch on very briefly on pedagogy. Donna, that's for you, and if you could just keep it brief, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. And so education, of course, is key to living in a sustainable way. And as we know, Indigenous pedagogy is a good pedagogy and one that we need to learn and know more about. And how you do that is, within your own journey of reconciliation, but it's really about exploring resources and meeting people and sharing in ceremony. So with the stories, we engage listeners and the storyteller in a respectful relationship of reciprocity that sustains oral culture. So what stories the old ones share will help us with sustaining old ways or sustaining the old ways. And so really this slide talks to some of the pieces around story and storytelling. And so certainly we understand that the experiential or hands-on learning from making learning stick and catering to different learning styles. So we know that most of our pedagogy is land-based, as you heard one of the elders share in the land acknowledgement video, that they're just part and parcel. And so we really need to make space ethically for that concept, and to live and breathe it. We need to, just share in some of the teachings that we know to be true, and that we want to make sure that your knowledge of stories and culture and history are passed on through storytelling. So.
Thanks, Donna. And this brings us to the fourth reason, if you recall. Thank you. That was a really nice summary of pedagogy. But we really want to talk now about a really important one, which is relationship. And this is what we're going to focus on here for the next few slides. But as I've noted before, from the perspective of an environmental scientist and ecologist, I really do believe that our relationship with the earth is clearly broken. And we see signs of that all around us with the species extinctions going on, and just the incredible human footprint that is everywhere, altering and degrading our systems. Closer to home, we conducted a survey last year involving 500 youth aged 15 to 24 right here in Alberta, and we found that 9 out of 10 youth have a moderate to extreme level of concern when it comes to the environment and climate change. And we also found that 70% of high school students were worried about their future as a result specifically of climate change. And so, what this study showed is that, students also understand that our relationship with the earth is broken, and they want to know how we can fix it. And I was at a presentation recently by Dr. Nigan Sinclair, and his whole presentation was called "Relationships Are the Curriculum." And that really resonated with me, that this idea of what we should be learning in school is all about relationships, and particularly our relationship to the earth. And when we think about it, what is that relationship? That's a really interesting thing to explore with your students. Where are we in relation to nature? And typically the Western perspective kind of tends to put people not only separate from nature, but also above it or dominating it. We hear about we see Earth as a provider of resources to be extracted by us, and sometimes we hear phrases like, "Oh yeah, like the working landscape, like the landscape is there to work for us." And even when we talk about stewardship, there's a sense of human domination or oversight, conveying the sense that nature is something that we can control or need to manage or take control of. And sometimes we see references to this kind of dichotomy between the environment and the economy or jobs. Okay, it's a very dualistic way of looking at things. But in Indigenous perspectives, they see things very differently. And Donna, do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. So, as we talked about the connection to nature, but really by contrast, almost all Indigenous cultures view humans as part and parcel in relationship, and it's embedded in nature. So there is no separation nor hierarchy. Nature is viewed as sacred. And with this sacredness comes the central notion of maintaining harmonious relationships, one that's born out of respect, reciprocity, and we need to be responsible. And the responsibility of heeding the wisdom of generations of ancestors that came before us to ensure that the well-being of generations will come after us. And so we really need to take good care of our earth. And the way we're doing it now, we're hoping that we're forwarding your knowledge on how to do better.
Do you want to say a few words about this
Sure.
video?
So this video is one that was created actually by Carla Badger from the First Nations and Métis Inuit and Education branch several years ago. And so it is titled Wahkôhtowin, and it's a Cree word. And Wahkôhtowin means that we have kinship to everything around us. And so it's a short story about the concept of Wahkôhtowin, which represents about how all things are connected or related. And so it's a story of how humans were created and their friendship to animals. And so we've embedded the link to it. We aren't going to watch it today, I understand, right, Miss?
No.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have time. I'm going to be the taskmaster here. But yeah, the link, all of the links and we've got lots of resources to show you at the end or share with you. That will all be shared with you through this presentation. So not to worry. I just threw this slide in really quickly. We're trying to give you hands-on things that you can use with your students immediately. These are just a series of questions that you could explore with your students after this video. I have to admit, this video really spoke to me, Donna, because although it's a bit of a cartoonish kind of video, it's super profound, and it really made me realize and think deeply about our relationship with the earth and with other living things. And that's what the video is all about. So it's very, very profound and rich, and I highly recommend it. So here's just an example of some questions that you could explore. So tell us about 7th-generation teaching.
So the 7 generations of teaching are really character education. And so we talk about it being the generations of generations past and generations forward, and that it's all about sustainability. And so many decisions today that will benefit 7 generations down the road, that is our grandchildren's grandchildren. So we know elders and knowledge keepers and traditional land keepers have always known ways to sustain the environment with story, through song, through oral stories, and they share this knowledge, and it's passed down generationally. So when an animal is killed, an offering is made to restore balance. And disruption to balance, with a hunter as an example, disrupts the person so they are not themselves, or that the person that they should be. And so really that's a teaching that's very well known in many cultures with Indigenous communities. So just wanted to share that. It is a video, and I believe it's about 3 minutes in length. And I don't believe we have time to share it today, but it is posted in the link for you to explore further.
Thanks, Donna. I did dig up this. Do you want to speak to this code a little
Oh,
bit?
no, go ahead, please do.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just trying to bring this back into the context of what it is that we're doing here. And I mean, I love this quote. Actually, it's a famous Indigenous proverb that says, you know, reminds us that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. So, you know, if we're trying to, you know, if there's anything to take home from what we're talking about here, is really about getting us to think about our relationship with the planet and what we're leaving to our children and grandchildren. You know, that's what we talk about when we talk about, you know, a sustainable future. So now, I'm just checking the time. We're not doing too badly, but this does bring us to a really important point of our presentation, which is, you might be thinking now, okay, so, you know, you've presented lots of interesting ideas. Well, that's all really interesting, but how do I get started? And if you recall, that was part of our title, is getting started with secondary students. So Donna and I have assembled here a list of 10 ways to get started. So we're going to go through them fairly quickly here if we want to have time for a few questions at the end and some wrap up. So 1 to 10, here we go. Number 1, I can certainly speak to that. The importance of attitude, having an open mind and heart, showing curiosity, humility, and respect. The first ingredient, such an easy one to drum up amongst yourselves and your students. The importance of relying on authentic resources. We have a lot of resources to share with you at the end. Can't stress that enough. And also, you know, the idea of reaching out and reaching out to and including local communities, elders, and knowledge keepers. Number 3, land-based. So as Donna so nicely explained to us, you know, Indigenous ways of knowing are really based and tied to the land. And so what a great place to start by just looking around us and what's going on in our local community around us and our local ecosystems. What are the Indigenous communities in our area? What treaty land are we located on? What landmarks exist that are of interest to the Indigenous peoples? Why are they significant in that? There's a great video here that shows this as an example from Writing on Stone, but the link is there for your future reference. So please do take a look at that when you if you want to later. Number 4 brings us to stories, and just kind of moving through these fairly quickly, but it's just a bit of a summary. As Donna talked about in terms of pedagogy, Indigenous pedagogy is all about storytelling. There's lots of lessons and teachings in these stories. And what I love about stories, and research has shown that stories engage not just the mind, but also the body, the heart, and the spirit. And that's so important. And stories are also conveyed through music and dance. Together, number 5, a super important word. Don't do this alone. Pair up with teachers who have other teachers who have an interest in this. Check out what kind of supports are available through your institution. I'm just going to ask someone to mute themselves. I think it's Jill, please. That would help. Thank you very much. And to reach out to your local Indigenous communities as well. So it's a lot more fun to embark on this journey together and not separately. Number 6, to integrate. And I noticed here, you know, we had a great representation of teachers from across the curriculum, and that's wonderful because you can weave Indigenous ways of knowing all across the curriculum and everything you do. We are strongly suggesting don't make that like a separate unit all by its own, but rather integrate it. Always take a look at things from a different perspective, and that will enrich all of your teachings. Now, Donna, on to number 7.
Sure. So part of this journey in providing some activities for you and some ways in which to direct you into the work is to talk about a little bit about decolonizing. And so this particular comment is envisioning. So dream a new dream, set a new vision for Indigenous knowledge.
Donna, I'm sorry, I inadvertently muted you. Can you unmute yourself again?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so dream a new dream and set a new vision for Indigenous knowledge and environmental ways to merge so that we can all learn together. The next slide is protecting, and again, it's a shared strategy on how to decolonize, but many facets to this approach particularly are to protect people, family, community, land, ceremony, languages, customs, and natural resources, and to protect the sacred sites such as writing on stone and designated protected areas. Really important in this work. And then the responsibility. It is our responsibility to ensure that we are stewards of this land and that we show respect and reciprocity for the land, animals, and each other.
Yeah, and then I just wanted to once again harp on this idea of relationship, and that sustainability really is all about our relationship with the earth and with each other. And I just wanted to reemphasize that, you know, when you really start to think about it, relationships really are the curriculum. And I just think that's just a great way of looking at things. And we have a slide here. Donna and I recently attended a presentation by Dr. Yvonne Pratt from the University of Calgary. And again, when we're talking about how do I get started, Dr. Pratt offered this framework that really shows 3 ways of getting started. And 3 approaches really for reconciliation and learning from each other. And the idea is there's really 3 levels there: listening to and learning from, and walking with and learning from, and working with and learning from. So, you know, if I can just use myself as my own example here, I started by listening. I started looking up, you know, Indigenous teachings, and signed up for some of Donna's workshops and started listening and learning. And then I thought, well, how about if we create a workshop around that? That's a bit of the walking. And I reached out to Donna and say, hey, would you like to work with me on this? So this is a great framework. It actually does work, and it's an easy place to start, not a threatening place. I think is to start with the listening. And I love what she says here about her big ideas. Small steps can yield big results. Sometimes, you know, it's a big topic. It's an intimidating topic, and sometimes we can be intimidated by that. But if you just start, you know, by taking small steps, you guys have all taken the step of joining us at our workshop, and kind of grow from there. So on that note, we do have, actually, we're a little bit behind our schedule. We're not too bad, but I think I'm going to encourage people to, if they have any questions for Donna and I, to put them in the chat. And we'll come back to the chat in just a few moments. And I do want to wrap up this workshop so that make sure that we end right on time. And there's a few things here I just want to show you. We do have another little video as well that's super interesting from Autumn Peltier. Now at the end, don't go away, because at the end I will share a link that allows you then to get in touch with us to request these presentations and the resources. So one thing I did want to point out, and this is a common theme throughout all of our presentations here at the symposium, is that we have created links to every unit in the grade kindergarten to grade 9 science and social studies curriculum. We started by creating links to climate change, and then we kind of expanded that work to other sustainability themes, including nature and place, which you see here in the green boxes. Here's some examples from the grade 8 unit, science unit on freshwater and saltwater systems. But I've also shown an example here from grade 9 social studies and understanding Canada, opportunities and challenges. So we created links to place and nature, which is so important when we talk about that relationship that we've been talking about. Then the links to Indigenous perspectives, and we also have links to climate change and also to other things. Anyways, it's all on our website, and you can access those by grade and by subject by going to our website. And of course, the link is provided here, so we'll share that with you shortly. And just a quick reminder that this session is part of our environmental symposium here at the CCTCA. And we have some other great sessions coming up this afternoon, one on climate change education, and tomorrow we'll be talking about biodiversity and also waste management. And all of these sessions are part of our secondary stream. So they're specifically targeted to secondary teachers. And I do want to thank our funders. Without their support, of course, our work to support teachers in infusing more environmental and Indigenous education into their teaching wouldn't be possible. So we're very grateful for that. And this brings me to our video, and we are good for time now. So the video is really short, it's 2 or 3 minutes. And Donna, while you introduce the video, I'll just set it up. So go ahead and just talk about this video.
Sure, this video is from Autumn Peltier, who is an Anishinaabe Indigenous clean water advocate, and she has been for a very young age. And so she brought awareness to the issues with clean water and advocating for clean water across Canada, not just only in First Nations communities, but all over. And so she is what we call a water warrior. And so at the age of 13, though, she addressed the world leaders at a UN General Assembly. And so this is a video that really just talks about her journey as a water warrior and how Indigenous role models and youths are everywhere. And so I know that if you go to CBC Indigenous, you will find a lot of great resources there as well. So, and with that, I guess we'll just press play.
Absolutely. So as soon as the video ends, we'll come back and we'll share with you how you can get a hold of us to get the presentations and the resources. And Donna and I can also hang out to answer some questions as well. So let's just go with the video then, and we'll be back right after.
We go out and pray for the water because the water is sick and it's contaminated, and we basically just do the water ceremony to pray for it for hopefully one day that that the water is clean. My name is Autumn Peltier. I'm the Chief Water Commissioner for Anishinaabe Nation. I'm 16 years old. I'm from Manitoulin Island, and I'm currently living in Ottawa.
I'm doing this work as we can't just pray anymore. We must do something, and we need to do it now.
Water is a basic human right. Everyone deserves access to clean drinking water, no matter what our race or color is, or how rich or poor we are. When I was 8 years old, I was attending a water ceremony in a First Nations community. I asked my mom to go to the washroom, and all over the walls said, "Don't drink the water, not for consumption, boil water advisory." And we had to use hand sanitizer after using the washroom. And I was very confused as to why it was like that. So I asked my mom, "What does all of this mean? Why can't we drink the water? Why can't we wash our hands?" And then she explained to me what all of it meant, what a boil water advisory was, and that the community that we were in has been on a boil water advisory for over 20 years. I visited a First Nations community, I think, last summer, and it's at Wahkôhtowin First Nation. They're a northern community in Ontario, and I had a chance to speak with the youth there. And honestly, some of the things they had to say they were heartbreaking. They were really sad. One of the kids said to me that she feels bad that her grandparents, who are both over 70, have to walk every day 2 kilometers with buckets of water to get their water from a well that everyone in the community has to share. And honestly, that's terrible. Like, I went there and you wouldn't even think that you're in Canada. They're living it, like I said, they're living in third world conditions, and we're in a first world country. It should not be like this. In 2016, I was at the Assembly of First Nations in Gatineau, Quebec, and I guess you could say I told off the Prime Minister when I was 12 years old. And that's honestly one of my proudest moments that I constantly look back to, because I felt like I really made an impact when I spoke to him. I was told to not say anything to him, just to give him the gift. But there was something in me that, like, this is my opportunity to say something. So I took the opportunity, and I said, "I'm very unhappy with the choices you've made and broken promises to my people. And then he said, I understand that. And then I started crying. He said he will protect the water. And so with that, I'm gonna hold him accountable to that as long as he's Prime Minister, because that's a strong promise to make, especially to a person like me. I like to say that's when you know something is wrong, is when a child speaks up. And that's when you have to do something to fix it, because we shouldn't have to be speaking up.
Wow, very powerful video, Donna. Thanks for bringing that one to our attention. And I think it fits in so well with the theme that we've been exploring today, that one of our relationship with the earth, hey? I also feel like it's powerful. What a great and interesting role model for secondary students to explore. Autumn Peltier, how old do you think she is now? Just a incredible person.
She's 16. I think she's going to be 17 shortly. But it is a great perspective, and we talk about sustainability, and we need to do this, all over, and as of yesterday. So it's really good to have that authentic and Indigenous perspective. So I'm really pleased to have shared that with you.
Well, thanks so much, Dawn. I see now that we're just about out of time. So that's fine, because we've made it to the end of our session. If you should be able to see on the screen then our contact information for both Donna and I. And now I just put the link in the chat. This is a link to a form, a very quick form that you can fill out and to get onto our mailing list, and then we'll send out our presentation along with all the links. So please get a hold of that link now. I'll leave it up for a little while here in the session, otherwise it'll disappear. There's also an opportunity in that form to give us some feedback purely on an optional basis, but we'd love to hear from our teacher participants what they liked about our workshops or didn't like so much, and then we use that information to continually improve our workshops. So any feedback that you can give us would be super appreciated. Of course, that's only optional. So I just want to thank all of you. Well, first of all, thank Donna for agreeing to do this workshop together. It's been a wonderful learning opportunity for me to work with you on this. And thank you so much for doing this. And certainly I want to thank all of the participants for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed this session, and hope you enjoy the rest of your convention. And please do think of joining us for some of our other sessions on sustainability. I'm going to stop the recording here, by the way, and then we can just maybe have a bit of a conversation.
Mm-hmm.